right, well, welcome to the very first video interview of the RSI Museum. Here talking to Chris Roberts and Rob Irving, two of our Cloud Imperium employees who are veterans of a game called Strike Commander.
Yep.
Which was released 20 years ago.
Demo Strike Commander there for you.
Rattle,
The new edition.
Released 20 years ago next month, and just released on GOG.com for $5.99 if anyone wants to give it a try. So why don't you start by telling me what each of you did on the project?
Well, let's see. I was the project director, and I don't know whether I'd say lead programmer, but I certainly did a lot of programming on it. So Jason Templeman and myself did most of the core initial programming anyway, and built the real space system, which was the engine that drove Strike Commander, later on Wing Commander 3, Wing Commander 4, Pacific Strike, Wings of Glory, and a bunch of other Origin games we had. So, Rob?
I was at TDA because we didn't have designers yet, and I built most of the game flow actually, which is the structure.
Say what TDA stands for.
Technical Design Assistant. Basically, we did all the jobs that programmers didn't want to do. Was essentially how it got started at Origin.
Well, and also like map layout.
Right.
And so like what a level designer does now is kind of what a TDA did.
Yeah, exactly, and a lot of number crunching and everything, just like it is today.
Right. How did Strike Commander come about? Did you come up with it after Wing Commander was released, or was this something that was in your head previously?
I'm not sure if it was something that was in my head previously. I was sort of thinking about the next game I wanted to do, and I wanted to do something slightly different. I was sort of pretty intrigued by the flight sim aspect, and I wanted to sort of take the Wing Commander presentation and storytelling approach even further than was done in the very first Wing Commander and kind of what we were doing in Wing 2, and put it in a different setting. And I thought it would be kind of interesting to sort of take modern day jet fighter combat, but sort of project it into the far future of 2011. Where society's sort of fallen apart, and corporations have become more and more powerful, and they're sort of all independent mercenary squadrons or armies you can even hire to sort of do your dirty business or fight for territory or resources.
Now, Strike continued your legacy of extremely cinematic games. If Wing Commander was letting people live in a Star Wars film, what was the inspiration for Strike?
Well, I think there's definitely a lot of Top Gun in it, although you're not quite as military-ish. So I would sort of say that there was a fair amount of Top Gun, and then I'm trying to think, because we sort of had this storyline that sort of involved people that were best friends at one point and split across into sort of competing squadrons over their principles, which is something I think is pretty common in various forms of narrative. I can't remember if that was necessarily inspired by a particular movie, but it certainly was. And the other thing that's interesting to note, if you look at the characters in Strike Commander, they all have resemblances to certain fairly well-known actors you would know. So at one point we were trying to persuade Origin, or I was trying to persuade Origin to see if we could go and get Mel Gibson to voice the lead and and let us have his likeness. So we just kind of have a guy that looks like Mel Gibson at the moment. That's before he got crazy.
Now, on release, you described Strike Commander's development as being the equivalent of Apocalypse Now for your gaming. Do you still look back on that way, or did you remember those days more fondly? And,
well, it's funny because I was actually reading my sort of Apocalypse Now forward in Sudden Death, which is the manual in Strike Commander, and in fact I'll pull it out here for you. Where was it again? It's a whole thing. Here it is. Yep. Okay. So Strike Commander, a game designer's apocalypse. It was 2.5 years ago, just after the release of Wing Commander, that I started out what I estimated to be a 1-year project. 2.5 years now is super quick for any game design, but obviously back then it sort of felt like an eternity, because Wing Commander was done in about 18 months or so, and I guess with this I was thinking, we can do it in a year, and I think we brought it out 2.5 years later, and EA was very upset because they sort of bought us before we finished it, and we said, hey, we're releasing this soon, and it took us a little longer. But looking back on it, relatively considering what we did, which was pretty revolutionary. We had proper 3D on the terrain, on all the objects. It was road shading and texture mapping, and it was real texture mapping. So no other PC game at the time, nor did any other PC game for quite a few years afterwards ever do like proper real-time texture mapping. Like Doom was 2.5D. I think Quake was the first id game that had proper 3D texture mapping. So we did a bunch of things. Or a real-time 3D cockpit and all that stuff was stuff that you see in Monday flight sims, and no one had seen. Still, it took years before anyone else did it. So I'm pretty proud of what we did. So to achieve all that and build a technology that was the base of many more games at Origin, like Wing 3 and Wing 4 and Pacific Strike and these other games, it was pretty impressive. But it was hard work. I mean, the team worked 6 to 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, and we thought we were doing it for a year, and it ended up being about 2.5 days. So that was probably the hardest, like in terms of constant burn or constant crush. That was probably the biggest gun. I think that sort of added a lot to the sense of apocalypse now. But looking back on it, I think it's kind of amusing that 2.5 years seemed like eternity when some games will take, Freelancer was 6 years before it came out, or Rage, I can't remember where it was. Rage was 6 or 7 years at id or something. So, and I don't know how much the most recent Grand Theft Auto, but that's certainly not 2.5 years. It's a bit longer than that too. So I guess maybe with hindsight, maybe not as apocalyptic as I thought, but yeah.
There was a lot of sleeping under desks, waiting for builds at 4 o'clock in the morning, things like that.
A lot of Wing Commander players were surprised by Strike Commander's flight model. Instead of an arcade game, it was an extremely accurate F-16 simulation. Why did you go in that direction?
Well, I know, I'm glad you recognize that, Ben, but I think when the game came out, a lot of people actually didn't even realize or give us kudos. I mean, I remember that people were complaining that F-16 Falcon was much more, Falcon 3 was much more accurate, and it wasn't actually. I mean, we actually spent a lot of time modeling it out. And we had quite a few first Iraqi War veterans that flew F-16s that flew it for us and gave us their feedback. So we actually decided that, because we wanted to sort of have a realistic flight simulator that was also fun, so we sort of went for that. And I think maybe because the fictional setting and sort of the way it was set up and the legacy of Wing Commander, people didn't assume it was accurate. And that's just the thing. People always assumed Falcon was accurate because that's what it was sold as, and ours couldn't have been accurate. So things that were not correct in Falcon were sort of taken into being correct. But yeah, no, we just thought it would be fun to try and make something that was fun but accurate at the same time. Wow. You want to say something, Rob?
I was just going to say, as much of the research as they'd let us have.
Yes.
We looked up every missile, everything we could get our hands on that they would let us have. AMRAAMs were classified. We couldn't find out how fast they were.
Now, arguably Strike Commander's biggest innovation was its use of textured 3D models instead of pre-rendered bitmaps. How did that come about?
Well, so originally what we were going to do is we were going to have the landscape was going to be textured and road shaded, and then when we revealed it, I think we did a big reveal in 1991 at CES. We blew everyone away, and at that time the ships were like they were in Wing Commander, where we had pre-rendered. We'd made 3D models and then rendered them as views all around them, and then we would draw whichever the bitmap view that was closest to where you were looking at. And we were going to model like buildings on the ground because they were pretty simple with textures and stuff. And we built this editor called EOR, E-O-R, which was built by Paul Isaac, who was long time worked with me on Wing Commander, Times Lore, and then Strike Commander, and everything I did at Origin, and then later on came with me to Digital Animal. And he'd written this editor, and we'd had this new promising kid that just came out of the Air Force called Paul Steed, and none of the real artists actually wanted to do with any of this like low-res, boring 3D stuff. So Paul was like, "Oh yeah, I'll build a couple of buildings or whatever." And so he went off and he was playing with his tool, which compared to the stuff we have now is super primitive. And like a week later, he sort of came to my office and said, "Hey, I want to show you something." And he'd like modeled like an F-16 in this 3D tool, and it's not like it wasn't a tool that's like now you do it really nicely in Max and import it in. It was hard to use, but it looked amazing, and we were like, oh my god, okay, and then so we basically threw out all the bitmap stuff and decided to everything, the planes as well as we were always doing the buildings on the ground and the landscape with 3D, but we were going to do the plane. We didn't think we'd get enough detail in the planes using real-time graphics because this was software. You didn't have as much, nowhere near as horsepower that we have now. But when Paul did it, we're like, oh my god, we got to have that. And now I look back at the graphics and it looks pretty primitive, but back then it was literally mind-blowing. And that was Paul Steed had a big reason for that happening, and I think so he was a pretty big contributor to sort of moving forward real-time 3D objects in games.
Now, Strike was set in the distant future of 2011. Did you think you would still be making games today at that time?
That was, what was that, 20, I think when we came up with the setting, it was like 20 years ahead of time. I don't know, that's probably, the youth. So, I'm not sure that was like, I'm only going to make games for 10 years and I'll be dead at the age of 30 or something, but I don't think we were, we definitely picked 2011 thinking that seemed like quite a distance off. And I guess we sort of felt like if we picked something like 2030 or 2040, that it would get into the realm where everyone would think it would have to have sci-fi and spaceships and stuff.
I'm looking to see if you have a bio in here. Oh no, there's not one for you. Because I said in 5 years I'd be writing full-time, or 10 years I'd be writing full-time, so we don't get that from you. Yeah, writing full-time. That's what I said, so no, I didn't think I was going to be making video games.
Yeah.
Was there anything cut from Strike Commander that you regretted? Early previews included an unusual array of aircraft, including a P-38 instead of just the modern jets. When did that change?
I don't remember a P-38.
Yeah, I don't remember the P-38. It was... I can't remember what we did. I think it was always a mercenary squadron, and you were always going to be flying jets. I think we dabbled around with the idea that you occasionally could like have an older school, like a Mustang or something. And then I think we junked it because we sort of decided that it just wasn't going to be very fun for you to be flying a World War II era fighter against a modern day jet fighter. There isn't much competition when that happens. So I think that was it. But no, I don't really regret. I actually feel like Strike Commander pretty much ended up with everything we wanted in it. It was probably one of the best crafted games that I've been involved in. So, Wing Commander, I always say, when I made Wing Commander, it was pretty much the game that ended up was the game that was in my head. And we designed it on paper, and it just happened, everything just sort of worked. First time, bam, like that. We didn't really have to revise anything. None of the missions were balanced or anything. It was literally the design that was done on paper. Strike Commander was a little different. It sort of felt like it was sort of like I said, crafted. It was almost like, doing the Venus de Milo or whatever, where we really chipped away and formed and made it, but every aspect by the time it was finished felt really polished, really well done. And so it's actually one of the games that I'm the proudest of. I think at the time it had a hard time getting some of the recognition. Obviously a lot of people liked it, but because of the hardware requirements, essentially it wasn't very playable unless you had a 486-33. And a 486-33, it was super smooth and a lot of fun. But if you didn't have that, then it could be frustrating. And I think that was probably one of the things that sort of held it back. It was almost sort of too far ahead of its time.
Were there ever any plans for a follow-up to Strike? Another tactical operations disc? I've heard of something called Phoenix Force.
Oh yeah, can't remember so much about Phoenix Force, but we did one. I think we did at least one mission disc, and I'm not sure about on the Strike Commander side. Sort of came out. I ended up actually selling really well, but at the time it sort of felt a bit underwhelming, mainly because maybe it was the 2.5 years development or whatever. And then I got sort of busy on Wing Commander 3, and then that sort of blew up. So I don't think, and there wasn't any conscious decision not to do a sequel. There also wasn't any conscious sort of plan to do a sequel.
But we got to run off and make a World War II game, which was really cool, since Wing Commander had inspired us to go back to that.
Right. You
World
mean
War II combat. So that was
Pacific
Strike.
Strike.
Yeah, that was loads of fun to do.
Can you tell me the story behind Zap SC?
Prame! Hi, Prame, wherever you are. So on his first day, because they had just canceled our 3 Year in Legends, and Prame came to work for us, his very first day, Prem got a hold of a utility that I think Jason had built, which was used to quickly delete directories from your computer, because that was hard to do back then. And it didn't check if it was a network drive. So on day one, Prem deleted our entire source tree from the network. So IT and all the programmers spent the entire weekend, I mean literally 72 hours straight, rebuilding source from individual machines and putting it back together. So Prem became known as Wipeout because of that.
Yeah, no, I remember everyone was very happy at that point. This is not all the automated backup systems you have now. In fact, I think we had just gotten a network or something in at Origin, because when we did Wing Commander, there wasn't any network. It was basically what they called sneakernet. Someone went, to the next person's office with a disk. So yeah, no, that was not a good start for Prem. But he turned good in the long run.
Thanks for letting me work on your game. What's this big red button do?
Yeah.
All right, now I've spoken to a couple folks, and they've all indicated that the Strike Commander ship party was an interesting time. Anything you can share or remember?
I have no recollection of that party.
Yeah, no, we had the ship party. We had it at my first house in Austin, which was out on Lake Traverse, and we'd been 2.5 years, and at the time that was incredibly long for any project, and everyone had worked really hard. So obviously there was a lot of, and everyone was really close, and there was a lot of, and we were all pretty young, which means we were all had high desires and tolerances to alcohol. So there was a huge amount of drinking that happened. My brother Aaron, I think, won the cup for that, as he normally does. He actually was quite famous for. We used to call him the 6 million margarita man. That was his sort of nickname for his drinking exploits. The various. I had a stone. There was a stone table that was in the garden area that was literally broken in two by people dancing on top of it. There was people passed out in the garden, in the gazebo area, everywhere. So it was pretty. It was a pretty epic party. I mean, don't forget, everyone at Origin, most of the people then were much younger than they are now. Like, everyone's now old, don't drink like that. But this is a bunch of 20-year-olds that had just worked their asses off for 2.5 years, 7 days a week.
Now, did you take anything away from Strike Commander that you carry with you still to Star Citizen? I Strike Commander. So like, there's a style of immersion and into, like, so for instance, for me, I really like immersion into a world and a universe, and there's a style of interface that I like to do that sort of is in the theme of the world, right? Like, I don't like game interfaces that are on top of whatever the view of your world is. And sort of Strike Commander perfected that from what we started with Wing Commander. So like, when you were seeing your ship and you wanted to load out the weapons, you literally saw your fighter sitting on the tarmac with these different missiles all sitting in their little carts that would be pulled in, just like you see if you see a picture of an F-16 with all the weapons splayed out in front of it, and you would pick it up. So I think that Strike Commander pretty much perfected that sort of cinematic kind of immersion style that was, we did in Wing Commander 3, but in Wing Commander 3 it was with live action instead of hand-drawn stuff. And it was what we started in Wing Commander, but sort of Strike Commander was the most polished version of it. And, you can, to this day, if you play something like StarCraft 2 and you look at their story stuff, their in-between their mission stuff, it is 100% that setup and system. And they've in fact said that they were sort of inspired by kind of what Wing Commander and some of the later games did. So I would say that was kind of one of the areas that I took away. And the other thing is doing your own, like doing R&D tech design on stuff that no one else has done before is harder than you normally think it is. It takes longer. But those are my two takeaways. I don't know if you have any, Rob.
Yeah, actually, for me, it was funny because I just assumed every game was that well crafted. Once I worked on my first game in the industry, I'm like, yeah, everybody does this. And then I went to other companies and realized that a lot of people didn't care about their games that much and didn't work that hard and didn't go to that extra level on the game. So now I'm like, this is where I want to be. AAA, that's where I want to be.
Now, would you like to revisit the Strike Commander setting someday? Could we see Sky Citizen in the future?
I would say that I had a lot of fun with Strike Commander, but I definitely feel that like sort of real world stuff is more limiting than doing something like Wing Commander or Star Citizen, which is much more sort of, you're in space and you can pretty much, you have it all. You can do all the crazy stuff in space, you can make your rules up, or you can do stuff that could be sci-fi down the planet. So as fun as it was, I'm not sure I would want to go back and do like a sort of more hardcore realistic simulator.
I think we already got this one right anyway.
FY, SC, 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 FY, FC, SC.
All the way around.
And this is on everything. And so what happened was, late night, I can't remember whether we had been out somewhere. Maybe we'd all been out drinking.
E3 maybe.
No. It was definitely in Austin.
Was it in Austin? Okay.
But essentially what happened is we worked really hard. So we would work 6 or 7 days. But occasionally Erin would organize the team night out. So we would basically all go out somewhere on 6th Street, because in Austin there was no 4th Street or Warehouse District or any of that stuff at that time. And everyone would drink themselves blind. And then I think one time we sort of came back to the office afterwards, and everyone was going around basically singing, and like, I can't remember, someone decided like we were going to do like an angry punk rocker song. And so we decided it was going to be the Strike Commander Strong. And this was actually pretty, it was like maybe a year into development or something. But basically what it was, and hopefully there's no 11-year-olds, but if there are, you turn off the thing right now. But it was, it'll be FU, which you can figure out what the FU is. Strike Commander, Strike Commander, Strike Commander. So imagine like an English punk rock, Strike Commander, Strike Commander, Strike Commander. And that was basically what people were like singing, because there was like, I can't remember who it was. I think Thomas Blom had his guitar, and he was like doing the punk. So basically it was sort of like this, Johnny Rotten.
Dicko Mather was probably involved in that.
Dicko Mather was definitely involved in that. So anyway, that sort of became the unofficial Strike Commander chant, which was, FU, Strike Commander, Strike Commander, Strike Commander, Strike Commander, which was based on this sort of punk rock impression thing we did when everyone's trashed. And it stuck, and that's why it's on there and all the stuff. So only really the development team knows that, but now all you guys do too. Secret. It's probably much more funny for us than you guys, but anyway.
Right. I'd like to thank you very much for being on our very first episode of the RSI Museum. I'm sure we'll be talking to both of you about other projects in the future. And happy 20th Strike Commander.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ben. Thanks for asking the questions. And thank you guys for watching.